Brian, I want to start with the defensive end recruiting. This is a real position of need in this class, not only from a numbers standpoint, but also from kind of a reloading standpoint. And I think that Notre Dame is off to a really, really good start.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a little bit about this when we talked about the commitment of Aiden Gobera, but also there's a commitment of Tyson Ford. And kind of break down, I guess, where the depth chart is right now and why those two guys are so important and what the needs are in this class.
Well, 2018, you only landed you landed one defensive end recruit, and then you moved a linebacker to defensive end, but that linebacker, Oviegofu, is now gone.
Right.
Justin Adamiola will be a fifth-year senior in 2022. We don't know if he'll definitely come back for that. You look at 2019, Isaiah Foskey, so far so good there, but then Nana Osafa-Mensah has suffered a bad knee injury, and he wasn't really developing like you'd hope a four-star recruit would develop through his first year plus on campus either. And then you look at the 2020 and 2021 classes. Again, 2020, Jordan Patelho, high upside guy. Alexander Ahrensberger is a high ceiling guy that I really like, but it's also a low floor guy. 2021, again, you got three very talented ends, but they're all lower floor guys with higher ceiling. So, and the reason that matters is because the lower floor guys have a greater potential to just not be factors at all. Where a guy that maybe has a lower ceiling but a higher floor, like Justin Adamiola to me is a low ceiling, high floor guy. Maybe he doesn't pan out to be a first-round draft pick, but you knew when he signed that this kid's going to play at Notre Dame. Like there's no doubt that Justin Adamiola is going to play.
Sure.
He's too smart. He's too instinctive. He's too tough. He's just a football player. Now, maybe he doesn't have Isaiah Foskey's size and length and athleticism, which lowers his floor. But you knew he was going to be a factor in the defensive line rotation. There was never a doubt about that. Where Adio Gandiji was more of it depends on how he fills out and does he learn this and does he learn that, right? And so that's the difference. Khalid Kareem was always going to be a player at Notre Dame. The question was how good. And in recent years, they've loaded up on a lot more of the guys that you just don't know if they're going to be factors at all, much less impact players. And so when you recruit that kind of player, there's a need for more volume of that kind of player. But every now and then, every 2 or 3 years, you really want to try to make sure that you land more proven prospects, more guys with higher floors. That's why Tyson Ford was so important, because to me, Tyson Ford is that higher floor guy. The nice thing about Tyson Ford, however, is he has a high floor and a high ceiling, and you need to land some of those guys. To me, Isaiah Foskey was that way. He was a high floor, high ceiling guy.
Sure.
Just on God-given athleticism alone, Isaiah Foskey was going to be at least a rotation pass rusher in Notre Dame.
Right.
And then, of course, if the other things pan out, he's a potential first-round draft pick type of talent. And so Tyson Ford is that kind of player. Aiden Gobera is more of the low floor, high ceiling guy. And that's great to have. And Notre Dame and Mike Elson has made a killing on those kind of guys because he's coaching them up, and then Matt Balis is doing what he needs to do. So you're off to a great start. The question is, how do you finish? And then the other part is, how much do you finish with? I think that's where this gets very interesting. We'll focus more on that when we talk about the defensive tackle position. So if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you look at that as well, where maybe the numbers could expand. But at the very least, Vince, they definitely need one more defensive end in this class. And to me, it needs to be a high floor, high ceiling guy. The ceiling is more important than the floor.
Sure.
But if they can find a guy with both, that's the ideal way to go. And when you look at the board, there's definitely some guys on the board right now that are that kind of player. And of course, as we've talked about before, there's one guy in mind that would make this is a very good defensive end class already. If they stopped now, it'd get a B to B plus, like at least on my grade.
Right.
But to get to that A category, which this foundation is already laid for a potential A grade at defensive end, it's all about Cyrus Moss at this point in time.
And we've talked about Cyrus Moss and what he can bring to the table, but he's out of Bishop Gorman, I do believe, in Nevada. And this is a powerhouse high school program. I mean, they're traveling across the country normally.
It's been good to Notre Dame. Ronnie Stanley,
yeah.
Alize Mack, Nico Fertitta, all from Bishop Gorman.
So he's the guy that is number one on your list to round out this defensive end class, right?
Yeah, he was kind of my number one end on the board all along. And, you know, Tyson Ford was kind of my number one power end. Cyrus is my number one drop end, but he has the highest grade overall as well.
Okay.
So, I mean, you get Tyson Ford and Cyrus Moss to go with Aiden Gobera, and now you're talking about a defensive end class that, in my opinion, just as high school prospects, school prospects. So
Right.
we're not talking about what, because we don't know what these guys, I can't compare them to what Julian Ekwara, Dalen Hayes, and Khalid Kareem turned out to be in college, right? But just as high school players, this is your best defensive end class since the class that brought them Stephon Tuitt, Aaron Lynch, and Eshaq Williams. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd say so.
It's pretty good.